Hi, I'm Rajiv, and today I am recaning a chair. A few months ago, I was hired to paint a sign, a storefront sign, for one of my favorite stores here in New York City, John Darien Company. John set me up in his basement with this 16-foot sign that had been made out of solid wood. And as I was painting, I was distracted because the basement was full of John's treasure trove of furniture. So I worked, but whenever I'd take a break, I would poke my nose around to see what he had down there, and I spotted something that I just couldn't take my eyes off of. At the end of my job, I asked him if maybe he would give it to me, and he very kindly said yes. This little love seat caught my eye, and I just wanted it. This was made by Tonet, and it was made in Austria. So I saw this thing and I saw the shape of it, and I thought, I think that's Tonet. And then when I poked my nose even closer, I saw this little label down here. It's not a label, it's actually stamped right on the wood. It says Tonet, Austria. So Michael Tonet started making furniture in the 1830s in Austria, and by the 1850s he had developed this method of steaming wood and bending it. And by the 1870s they were mass producing furniture in Austria and exporting it. Tonet was producing 400,000 pieces of bentwood furniture by 1870. The cafe chairs that all of us have probably seen or have even sat in before, the origins of the bentwood cafe chair are Tonet. So when I saw this love seat at Darien's, I went over to it and I knew there wasn't a seat, but the thing that I was looking for were these holes around the perimeter of the seat. Because what the holes tell me is that this was originally caned, and it was originally hand caned. So that's what we're doing today. I am recaning this beautiful love seat from John Darien Company. I'm sure many of you have actually seen cane furniture before, but there are a few things that I can tell you so that you can learn about what to look for if you're ever intrigued to try this yourself. This is a hand caned seat. If we look at this seat over here, we can see that the whole thing is caned, and it was done by hand. There's actually machine-made cane that comes in a sheet. You can buy it by the foot. It comes on a roll, and although it's called machine-made cane, it's fed through a machine, but a lot of it is actually done by hand in places like the Philippines. And that machine-made cane, the sheet, is often put into chairs like this, or it's used to replace a hand cane seat that is broken. Very easy, quick way to tell if something is machine caned or hand caned is by looking at this edge. If it doesn't have these little loops holding the binding cane in place, then it was machine caned. If it does have these loops, then it means that it was hand caned. Many things were hand caned originally, and then the caning would have broken over the years, and someone decided to replace the caning with machine cane. So what they did was they pulled out all of the pieces of broken cane, and they went along the edge with a router, and they gouged out a trough, and then they got machine cane, like a sheet of it, they cut it to size, they put it down on here, and they pushed it into place. That's the quick, fast way of replacing a seat, getting a piece of machine cane. If you get something that has that routed edge, that has been machine caned, but you look on the bottom and you see that there are holes, it means that you can pull out the machine cane and you can recane the chair by hand. It is daunting, it is meticulous, it is time consuming, but there is something that is so gratifying about this process. There is something about reaching the end of this process that leaves you in awe. Caned furniture is incredibly light and graceful, but it is very strong and durable. As long as the caning is not pierced by like a sharp metal object, this will hold a lot of weight. Like It's not, this wouldn't be just for kids. Adults could sit on this and it's fine. So this is called cane, and the cane comes from the rattan plant. The rattan plant is a palm. It belongs to the palm family, but it's actually a vine that grows up over the trees and reaches the top of the forest canopy. And that long stem, the long uniform thick stem, is what is used for this stuff. It's taken down, cut into thin strips and dried, and it's very strong and durable. This type of woven furniture is also very, very old. There are examples of Egyptian furniture made out of reed and papyrus, woven rush seats, and those pieces of furniture go back to 4000 BC. So this is a very, very old process, but it's also very simple, which is why I love it so much. This is like all natural, and the technique is simple. It's like over and under, and yet you can produce this very strong, utilitarian, and beautiful thing in the end. So now, the other thing you need to know about cane is that it comes in different widths, and you need to figure out what width you need. The way you do that is you look at your piece of furniture, and you have to actually measure the size of the hole, like how wide this hole is. But more importantly, you also need to measure the distance from the center of one hole to the center of the other hole. So if it's like this, you measure that distance about 4 times and you take the average. And there are charts and guides by all of the people that sell cane telling you how to determine the width of cane. So I'm not going to go into that over here. I just want to let you know that you need to figure out what width of cane you need. These are 2 different widths. This is super fine, and this is fine. So this is 2 millimeters, and that's 2.5 millimeters. The reason why this is so important, and you need to know what width of cane you need, is because this cane is going to pass through each hole at least 4 times, sometimes 6. So if it's too wide, then it's not going to pass through the hole after a certain point. And if it's too thin, then it's going to move around. So determining the width of the cane is important. This is binding cane, and you can get this also from the same suppliers that you get the weaving cane from. The binding cane is made from the same outer bark of the rattan plant, but it's used on the very edge to finish the caning once you're done. So from the supplier, you'd order your weaving cane and a bit of binding cane. The next thing you need is an awl, a nice awl that comes to a sharp point, which will be very useful eventually. And you need some pegs. So these pegs hold the caning in place while we're weaving. You need a sponge, any kind of sponge will do, to wet the cane. This has to be damp or wet while you're weaving it. You can start and stop this process. You can weave part of the seat and you can leave it for days and let it dry out, and you can come back to it later. But when you come back to the seat to weave it later, you have to re-wet it. You also need some water that's in a bucket or a container that will accommodate just a few strands of cane at a time. You don't want the cane to be sitting in the water for more than 20 minutes to 45 minutes because it'll discolor the cane and turn it gray when it dries. So when you get your cane, and it's like this, it usually comes in a coil or a hank, you untie it, you soak it for about 10 or 15 minutes in some warm water, and then you hang it up. And you hang it up so that it will lose this shape and it'll just be a long, smooth strand like this over here. This is why it's so nice to have a peg rail, a shaker peg rail on your wall. So you can hang your hands, you can hang your coats, you can hang the candles that you made, and then you can hang the cane for when you're caning. Nerd! Mise en place. This is what my watercolor teacher Marcelo taught me in our first lesson. It's very important to have everything in its place, you know, mise en place, so that you're not reaching all over the place, that everything is laid out properly. Okay, now we need a little love seat. So to start caning, the very first thing you need to determine is the middle of the seat. The very first time you attempt to do this, it's always best to do it on a perfectly square seat. That's the easiest. Sometimes the seats have rounded fronts, sometimes the seats are completely round. That's a little trickier, but it's still totally doable. I'm gonna show you this process on this piece, which is a little complicated, but I will say that if any of you out there are gonna be doing this, get a book. This book is the book on caning. It is called The Caner's Handbook, and I love it. The book covers step by step this whole process. It's kind of the only book out there that I could find that was very helpful on how to do this. There's also a great video by the company from which I get my cane. This cane and all these supplies comes from a company in Kalamazoo, Michigan called Peerless Rattan, and it's run by Ed and Cindy Hammond. And Cindy has a great, simple, clear video on YouTube on how to hand cane a seat. So when you're done watching this video, if you want to watch another great video about how to do this by a real professional, please go watch Cindy's video. I think it has over 1 million views. So it's the comprehensive guide to how to do this. Here's the very middle of this seat, and on this front rail I'm going to put a peg to the right of that middle hole. Now, I found the same hole on the back. I'm going to put a peg to the right side of that hole. Okay, so I've marked the center of the seat. Now we are ready to start the process, which is very exciting. Okay, here's another little tip. Before you start caning, look at your piece of furniture, and if it needs any kind of refinishing or oiling, do that before you cane. Do it like a week before you cane so that it could really cure. Because once the caning's on here, you don't want to have to be putting finishes on top of that caning or trying to work around it. So this was actually very dry, and all I did was oil it up with a mixture of linseed oil and turpentine, and it came back to life. I have a few strands of cane soaking in here. Only soak a few strands at a time because you don't want them sitting in here for too long. We start by taking out a piece of cane. The cane is wet, and what you want to do is find on the cane these little nodes where the new stem growth started, and put your thumbnail on it, and you'll feel a place where it runs smoothly, a direction in which it runs smoothly, and if you run it the other way, your nail will catch on it. You want to weave in the direction that the vine was growing, which is the direction in which your finger or your nail can run smoothly. So for this piece of cane, I now know it's this way. So this is going to be the end that I start with. The cane has a flat, smooth, shiny side, and it has a kind of dry, ribbed underside. You always want the shiny side to be up. That's the good side. The dry side is going to go down. So through this whole process, you always have to be conscious of having the right side of the cane up. And even while you're weaving, you have to be very careful that it doesn't twist, okay? That can happen easily. So my cane is set up in the right direction, and the shiny side is on the top. I'm going to remove the peg from that hole at the back. I'm going to insert my cane with a protrusion of about 4 inches, and I'm going to put the peg back in, pegging it in place. And that peg is holding it now. Now I pull the cane across to this peg, and I take it out, and you find your end, and my hands are always on the cane so that it's not going to twist, and you insert it in this hole and bring it through. The hardest part about this process is gauging the tension, because if it's too loose, then the seat, once you've finished all your whole work and you sit on it, if it sags in, you wove it too loosely. And if it's too tight, then it can break and snap. However, I think from my experience that you can't make it too tight. The only thing about pulling it too tight at this point is I think it's very hard to weave. I'm also not a professional, so I'm saying all this stuff as a complete novice. I'm just gonna tell you right now, I'm not a professional caner. I have only done this once before. The reason why I want to show this to you is because this is my second time doing it. The first time brought me so much joy, and I want to show you that you can just dive into these things and try. You can do this at home. It's simple, and if you love it, then it might become something that you do regularly. So, okay, back to the holes. This is now through this hole. I've pulled it taut, but I'm not yanking on it like this. It's pulled taut, peg. Okay, the peg goes in, holding it in place. Now, I find the end of the cane and I put it into the hole that's to the right of the peg. And when it comes up, it needs to be the smooth, shiny side. And at the bottom, I also am making sure when it comes through that this underneath at the bottom is not twisted. So see this loop down here? So this loop, I'm going to keep my finger in there to make sure that it goes in smoothly. You don't want it twisted like this because it'll break the cane. You have your finger there to guide it. Once you know that it's smooth, then you can pull. And now this peg, once this is pulled taut like this peg gets moved over to here. And then we find the end. I didn't say this was fast. I didn't say this happens quickly. I never said that. The shiny side always faces up. And again, the reason why you see my hands moving so much, both hands are always in contact with the cane, is I cannot let it twist. So now, this is here, and this is taut. Another peg, peg. Find the bottom and go to the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave from hole to hole all the way till the end. Okay, I'm just going to do that and you're just going to watch. So the very first time I did this is only the second time I've done this, but the first time I did this was at the very beginning of the pandemic when we were all ordered to stay at home. I thought to myself, oh boy, how long is this going to last? And at the end of this, what do I want to have to show for the time that I spent alone at home? And I just thought, okay, I'm going to do things. I'm going to do the things that I've wanted to do for a long time that I just have not really had the time to do. The first thing I did was order some cane from Peerless Rattan to recane this chair I had found at a thrift shop. It had been sitting here for a long time, needed a new seat, and I got the supplies, I watched Cindy's video, I got a book on caning, and I just followed step by step. And at the end of that week, when I had that seat completely rewoven, I was just beaming. It was so gratifying, so thrilling. The funny thing is, I called my uncle who was born and raised in Ceylon, my mom and dad are from Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and I told him, I said, Chimama, I recaned a chair like the furniture from Ceylon. And he goes, Apen, which is like a term of endearment. He's like, Apen, can I tell you something? Don't get offended, okay? And I'm like, what? He's like, it's not that special. He's like, I did it, my father did it, everybody knows how to do it. It's just, you just go in and out and over and under. He was right. So I'm saying that to you because I want that to actually be words of encouragement from my uncle. This is not an art form. This is not something that you need to have talent, an innate talent to be able to do. It is something that in Ceylon, in these tropical countries, it was a practical task that many people knew how to do because they had a lot of caned furniture, and eventually certain pieces would break. So there you go, from my Jinnikali mama. It's not anything special, it's something you can do. So I've reached the end of this strand. I'm going to put it through this hole, I'm going to peg it, and then I'm just going to get another strand. I need to find the direction again. The reason why you want to find the direction in which the cane was growing is because it aids in this threading process. If you're working against the growth, it's a little harder. Okay, so that's the end. The end is going to go in the next hole, again with a little protrusion of about 4 inches. It gets pegged, and we just continue. At this point where this starts to curve, you're going to have to figure out how to keep these as evenly spaced as possible. And that means that you end up skipping holes. You don't just go from one hole to the next at this point while it curves, because the strands would be too close together. So also be aware that the cane can split, like it could split lengthwise. And if it splits, especially if it splits in the middle, you want to stop and replace that piece of cane, because that compromises the strength of the cane. So you could see here, the end of this is split. Can you see that now? Little split in the cane. And since that's at the end, that's okay, because this is just getting a lot of wear, that's why it's split. But if it happens in the middle, cut the cane, like cut that split out and then just start over. You are working with a natural material. You are working with something that came from nature. You're working from a 300-foot vine. It is not going to be perfectly consistent throughout this whole process. So you really have to look. You have to look at every piece that you take. And you have to ask yourself, do I really need to use this piece? Is there maybe a better piece? Is this piece compromised? And then leave the compromised pieces to one side so that at the very end, if you absolutely have to, because you don't have any more cane, you use those. But try to pick the best pieces of cane for the process. This is the sort of activity that it demands time. And if you're doing this for the first time, it also demands concentration. But I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think this is one of those things that is very good for mental health. Because while you're doing this, you have to be alone with your mind. And I think that's a very good thing. The other thing is that not only do you have quality time with yourself, but at the end, you have something to be proud of. You've made something. You've kind of brought something back to life. You've brought a piece of furniture that wasn't really functional anymore because the seat was gone. You've made it functional again. Oh, the step 1 is almost done. Look how exciting. That looks a little too close, and this looks a little too far. I'm going to skip a hole here. So this is where it's up to you. And I've done this before, so now I know, like I've done it once, but now I know how important it is to make these decisions now, because this spacing is going to affect every subsequent threading. Okay, this gets pegged, and step 1 is done. Now we're ready for step 2. This is step 2. Going from, first we went from top to bottom, that was step 1. Now we're going from side to side, Heidi. So we're going to go like this, like from the side to the side, and we're going to start from the back coming over to the front, okay? You understand what I'm saying? Here's the tricky bit. On a curved piece of furniture like this, like where it's curved, where do you start? Because when it's a square, you can clearly see where the top is, because it's a square. But on a curve, the way that I would do it, the way the novice would do it, is to place the cane down and to just see, like, oh, if I put it in that hole over there and I pull it right taut across, first of all, is that straight? No, it's not. And now, is that straight? Oh, that's better. I need to get on top of it. That's what she said. Okay. So, there. I think it goes in that hole. That's what she said. And I'm just going to continue working side to side, going from the back to the front, being very conscious as it curves of whether or not I need to skip a hole. What you want to see at this point is squares starting to form. You want to avoid rectangles. Okay, we did top to bottom. We did side to side. Step 3 is top to bottom again. What we do is we start on this end where we were before, and we start from the front rather than the back so that there'll be an end on the front. That doesn't really matter. What's important here is that you're going to place the cane slightly to the right of step 1, okay? So you peg it and you're going to go through the same holes, so you're just going to follow along. This step 3 is going to be sitting on top of step 2 because it's going over step 2, but we're placing it slightly to the right of step 1. So it doesn't sit directly on top of step 1. It's not just layered on top of it. It's sitting slightly to the right of step 1. So now I'm going to pull it down and watch this. I'm going to lay it just to the right of step 1. So this becomes kind of finicky, but you can use your awl if you have to and just push step 1 over. Pull this so that it's sitting just to the right of step 1 and peg it. There. Okay, come up through the next hole. On this side I had skipped a hole going top to bottom, so I'm going to follow exactly the same way. Skip that hole, come up through the next one, make sure it's not twisted, and then again pull it slightly to the right. Just following exactly what you did in step 1. So over here, after this one, I skip a couple holes. Okay, step 3, done. Step 4 is where we go side to side again, but now we're actually going to be weaving. We're going to weave under step 1 and over step 3. And this strand sits below step 2. So when we did this way, we were putting the strand to the right of the first strand. Now when we're going this way, we're putting it below the first strand. I'm going to start with this strand right here. I want this sitting to the south of that strand. Okay? Not above it, below it. And I'm going to start by going under step 1 and over step 3. So here's my strand that I'm weaving. I'm going under step 1 and over step 3. And then I'm pulling. Now I'm just going to continue that way for step 4, weaving the strand below the horizontals that I've already created, over and under the strands that are going up and down. And this is going to take a long time. So I think you should, you and I should take a little break. I'm going to go do my thing, and I'm going to come back to this when I've made some progress. And then I'll show you the the last little bit of this, which are the diagonals. As the sunflower turns on her god when he sets, the same look which he turned when he rose. Well, when you left me here, I was doing step 4 of 7, and it is 4 days later, and I'm on step 6. So I've had an intense few days of caning, and I've been caning all day. I haven't gone to the gym. I haven't done anything else other than caning, because I wanted to get this done to show you the whole process. And while I was doing it, I realized this video shouldn't be about every single step of caning, because there are better videos out there, and there are videos by authorities on the subject, mainly Cindy Hammond's video from Peerless Rattan, the 7 steps of caning a chair. What I want this video to actually be is a documentation of this process, so that you all can see what goes into a cane seat, and maybe it'll inspire you to try it yourself. But even if you're not going to do this yourself, I think just seeing it done will change your opinion and your view of all of these caned pieces of furniture that you've probably seen before in your life. You'll have a greater appreciation for it, and I think you'll probably be a bit more careful when you come across one of these pieces out there in the world after seeing how long it takes to do this. I am weaving the last diagonal on the chair. When I left you, or when you left me, I was weaving the first strand from side to side for step number 4, and I started in the middle of the bench, which was a mistake. You don't start in the middle because the tension is not even in the middle. It's all over the place. You start at the top or the bottom and then work your way across. So that's what I did. I pulled out that strand and I started it again at the top of the chair, and then it went smoothly. This is a very, very time-consuming process with all of the hours that I've put into this seat, and not only the hours, but the focus. Like, you really have to watch every place that the cane traverses has to be correct. Otherwise, everything else gets thrown off. And when you look very carefully, you'll be able to see your mistakes. So, paying someone else to do this, paying a professional to do this by hand, that's actually not a lot of money considering how long it actually takes, especially if you're a beginner and you've never done this before. But I don't want that to dissuade you from trying. It's not hard. This is not something that's hard to do, and I cannot stress that enough. It is simple. It just takes focus and time. One of the things about this process that you learn that is difficult, but that is also good, is discipline. You have to be disciplined in order to finish this job and in order to do it properly. So, while I was working with this, there were so many moments when it just wasn't working. I couldn't pull the cane through. I would pull it through and then it would break. It was looking incorrect, and all of those things are things that you learn from. Mainly what you learn is that you have to listen to this material. It's a plant. It's completely natural, and you can try to make it do what you want it to do, but sometimes it just won't do it. And if it's not doing it, you have to ask yourself why. Why does it keep breaking? Maybe it's snagging on something. It can be very, very frustrating, but that's also the thing that makes you appreciate this material in this process. It makes you see that you can't fight it. You have to learn to use it in the way that it wants to be used. That's something that Guy Wolf, my pottery mentor, always says about clay. You can't fight the material. You have to listen to it. The beauty of the finished piece stands on very subtle elements of this process. As I'm coming to the end, you start to see these patterns form along the edge. At the top and the bottom, there are these X's that have formed, and at the corner, there are these little like sunbursts almost that are really beautiful. I love seeing these sunbursts form. So this is the last diagonal. This is step number 6. Step number 1 was this strand going down here. Step number 2 was this strand going across. Step number 3 was this strand going top to bottom over 1 and 2. Step number 4 was this cross, and that was the first time we actually started weaving over and under, over and under. Step number 5 was this diagonal going this way, all of these diagonals, and those get woven too. Those got woven over steps 1 and 3 and under steps 2 and 4. And now, step number 6 are these diagonal strands. And these diagonal strands are going over steps 2 and 4 and under steps 1 and 3. Over, under, side to side, back to front, upside, downside, inside, outside. You got that, Heidi? If you're going to try to do this for the very first time and you're looking for a piece of furniture to cane, try to find a square seat, a chair with a square seat, a completely square seat, not even a curve at the front. A square seat is the easiest, simplest thing to learn on. Oh, twisted, see? You see that's twisted there? Right here, that's the underside on the top, which is wrong. So it got twisted right there. So you have to make sure that the cane is always smooth side up, and then pull. And you end up using your awl when you reach the rails to lift the cane, because the pattern doesn't stop when it reaches just because it's reaching the rails. You don't just randomly stick it in any hole. You need to pay attention and follow the pattern. Okay, this is the last piece in the last hole, and wouldn't you know it, it just won't go. Loosen it with the awl a little. And this wood is cracked here, so I have to be careful. There. Take that. Okay. The caning is done. Now, we just have a couple of finishing steps. But look at that. This is the fun part. To pick up the piece of furniture that previously did not have a seat. You couldn't sit on this before. You'd go right through if you tried. And now, listen. So if we look at our antique chair, we can see that the edge, all the holes have been covered with a piece of spline. Here's what the spline looks like. It's the same thing as the cane, but it's wider. The way we start is by inserting the spline into one of the holes at the back, over top. Now, I have to hold the cane at the bottom. So this is a bit tricky because you feel like you need an extra pair of fingers. what you need to do is pull, and pulling the cane, a loop really, to anchor. Oh, don't make sure it's not twisted. That damn twist. There. And then I press down and really pull on the cane. It should make a little dimple in the spline. I'm going to bind it on every other hole. Maxwellton's braes are bonny, where early falls the dew, and 'twas there that Annie Laurie gave me her promise true. Now that spline is secure, and the seat is caned. Done. Now, one last step for finishing this unsightly mess of hairy eyebrows. You can't leave it like this. This is a mess. So the last step is tying off all of these ends. So this should be very damp. And then this goes from the inside to the outside first. And if you need to use the awl to pry up the loop, you want this to go under the adjacent loop. Lift up the loop, put it through, and right before it's tight, slip it back inside, and then pull it tight. And now pull the end. Press down with your finger and pull the end, and pull it towards the inside. Okay, the last little knot. There. I go to snip the ends and I'm snipping little loops. Dun, da, da, da. Well, there you have it. This is the part where you can step back or get real close and look at it and go, wow. It's very hard to believe that these strands of cane going down, going across, and going diagonally form this beautiful pattern that we've all seen, whether we've noticed it or not. I hope this inspires you to either try this yourself with a chair that needs some love, or to never, ever, ever look at a caned piece of furniture the same way again. I'm Rajiv. This video was brought to you by viewers like you who contributed to the GoFundMe campaign to help me start my YouTube channel. Thank you. If you liked this video, please subscribe so that we can keep making more videos just like this one.